Words are bridges.
शब्द सेतु हैं।
अल्फाज दिलों को और इंसानियत को जोड़ने का एक अजीम और तरीन पुल है।
വാക്കുകൾ പാലങ്ങളാണ്.
लफ्ज़ सवेरी कदलदारान
वहीनथुन
आखर हमार मेल सन आखर हमार जोड़
শব্দই সমন্বয়ৰ হেতু
Cocktailok yakraise
Thuhi inkung kainasiam tu ani.
Ajrahana apati disale.
ग्राउथाइनिंग याउक्राई
शब्द सेतु हुन.
शब्दां दी सान।
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of our festival co-directors Namita Gokhale and William Dalrymple and festival producer Sanjoy Roy, I welcome you back for this week's session on words are bridges. Tirupavai, the French connection. Dr. Vasumathi Badrinathan in conversation with Her Excellency Sonia Barbry, Consul General of France in Mumbai. Tirupavai, poetry from classical Tamil literature by Andal, has been translated into French by Dr. Vasumathi Badrinathan, a classical singer, scholar, writer, and academician. Andal is the only woman among the 12 Alvar saints of South India who lived between the 6th and 9th centuries. She expresses her unconditional devotion to Lord Vishnu through the beautiful pastoral verses of the Tiruppavai. The poems, also considered as songs, continue to hold a special place in the devotional practices of the Vaishnava community, especially during the month of Margali. The Tirupavai is also rendered in Carnatic music. Badrinathan uses her language and musical training to translate the verses in French, believing that translations of India's early texts must reach foreign audiences. In conversation with Her Excellency Sonia Barbry, Consul General of France in Mumbai, she will explore Andal's Tirupavai for its poetry, musicality, as well as its mystical quality that transcends the barriers of language and tongue. Dr. Vasumathi Badrinathan is a Carnatic classical singer, scholar, writer, and academician. A Fulbright Fellow and an Erasmus Mundus Scholar, Badrinathan has published columns, articles, short stories, poems, and translations from Marathi and Tamil into French. Her recent book, Le Tirupawai ou le chant, Matinal, the Margali, is a translation of the classical Tamil poetic verses of Andal's Tirupavai into French. Badrinathan blends her national, international, and multicultural expertise in bridging the gap between business, people, cultures, and languages. Sonia Barbry, Consul General of France in Mumbai, has a deep connection with India, which started more than 2 decades ago. Barbry is a graduate from the Institute of Political Studies in Paris and the National Institute of Oriental Languages and Civilizations in Hindi and Civilization of South Asia. After several years in India and as a student of Hindi, Bharatnatyam and Dhrupad, and then a French teacher at the University of Banaras, Barbry joined in 2004 the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where she was in charge of France's policy with Pakistan and Sri Lanka before being deputed to India, where she spent 4 years as a political advisor at the French Embassy in New Delhi. On September 10, 2018, she took office as the Consul General of France in Bombay. She has the distinguished honor of being the first woman to hold this position since 1859. Before we move on to our session, we request you all to please follow us on our handles JLFit Fest on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter to get notified on all our upcoming sessions. In case any of you drop off due to bandwidth issues, you can find us on our YouTube and our Facebook page. We now present Tirupavai, the French connection. Dr. Vasumathi Badrinathan in conversation with Her Excellency Sonia Barbry. Over to you, Sonia.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored and privileged to be with all of you here today to discuss Dr. Vasumathi Badrinathan about her translation in French of the Tirupavai by Andal, which has been published at Banyan Edition in Paris. Good morning, dear Vasumathi. How are you?
Good morning, Sonia. Very well, and thank you for being here with me today.
So it's really a honor, and I would like to start by asking you, why did you choose the Tirupavai to translate into French? What made you choose this, poem, and what motivated your choice? From the perspective, of course, of a musician, an academician, and a person close to language and poetry.
Thank you, Sonia. In fact, yes, that's a very pertinent and important question because I have grown up with the Tirupavai and the poetry that the Tirupavai belongs to, which is called the poetry of the Alvars. Andal herself was a poet, saint, philosopher, and she was the only woman amongst the 12 Alvars. So 11 other men and Andal herself, and all of this poetry, which forms an anthology, 4,000 verses, has been part of my growing up years. So I've been listening to it being sung, I've learned it, and always had that ambience, you know, of this kind of poetry and this philosophy in my formative years from my parents, my grandparents, etc., visits to the temple, where these form an integral part of spiritual life and recitations. So being very, very close to this poetry, and with my engagement with French, I have been doing translations, and at some point I've always been mesmerized by Andal and her poetry. And I really wanted to translate this beautiful work of the Tirupavai and wanted to take it to other audiences overseas. So I said, why not combine my expertise with French and translate this? So that's how I took upon this task of bringing two things close to my heart. One is the Tirupavai Tamil language, which is my home language, and of course French, which is also very close to me. And that's how the translation of the Tirupavai was born. Yes.
Wow, that's amazing. But actually, we are currently in the month of Margali, which is, I believe, mid-December to mid-Jan or something like that.
Exactly.
And
yes.
this is the time when the poems of the Alvars and especially of Andal were sung in the Vishnuid temples in the south of India, but also in other states. And what is the relevance today? What is the actuality of those poems? Are they still sung in temples today, or is it a tradition which is being lost over the time, or maybe becoming more a written tradition?
No, actually, the most interesting part of it is that all this poetry of the Alvars, which we collectively call the Divya Prabandham, all this poetry is living poetry. And it is in circulation since centuries, since generations, and transmitted through the oral path. You know, this is part of the oral traditions, the oral heritage, and it's always been there. And today, of course, we have books to rely on, but then through generations and through years, it has been coming down through oral transmission. So what is curious is that this poetry is really living poetry, and it's been there ever since, and recited and sung and kept alive, as you rightly pointed out, in the Vishnu temples, because it's all of this pay homage to Vishnu. It's part of the Vishishtadvaita philosophy, which holds Mahavishnu at the core of it. And during this month, you were absolutely right in pointing that out. This is the month of Margasirsh, which is currently on mid-December, mid-Jan. And in all the Vishnu temples, especially in South India and others here also, which follow those traditions, the poetry of the Alvar is recited. All the Alvars, their poetry is recited. And Andal's Tirupavai, in fact, assumes a special importance. There is one Tirupavai per day, which is really honored. So, you know, you say today is the first day, it's the first Tirupavai, second day, the second Tirupavai, and so on. So when I was a kid, and, you know, those were the days when we would receive handwritten letters in those inland covers, the blue, gray blue letter covers called the inland covers. Many people of my generation would know what that is. So whenever a letter came, it would be sealed. and you could only see the name of the center if they write it at the back. Then you had to carefully open it so that the whole thing would unfold into one scroll. And often my parents would receive letters from their parents, my grandparents, and from other elders. And if it came in the month of Margasirsh, or Margali, as we call it in Tamil, on the top would always be inscribed the Tirupavai of the day. So if they wrote it on day one of the Tiruppavai of Margali month beginning, the letter would begin on the top with the starting line of the first Tiruppavai, or the second, or the third, or the 23rd, or whatever. So it's so integral to our culture, and it's always been there, and it will keep going. That's the best part of it, you know. You don't have to make any special efforts to revive it. It's there. It's handed down from generation to generation. It's a living tradition.
Yes, and I think it's very important actually to keep translating the old text.
Yes.
Because these are, you know, like knowledge of humankind, and it doesn't belong to India only. It doesn't belong to the 6th or the 7th or the 10th century. It's actually a universal knowledge, and we cannot afford to lose it, because it has its relevance today, because it's especially because they are spiritual texts that speak about, you know, the crave for God, or for, you know, the absolute, and and this is beyond any borders, beyond any cultural differences. So I think it's great to know that these ancient texts are still translated into another language and giving this universal access to another people and another culture. So it's,
yes, you are absolutely right, and that was another motivation for me, because Andal's poetry is universal. It's timeless. The core values that are enshrined in it, you know, devotion, spirituality, rising, taking yourself from one level to the other, you know, that is beyond religion, actually, because it's touching the core of the self. And then her poetry is so simple, it's so beautiful. She has done two major works, the Tirupavai and the Nachiyar Tirumuri. The Nachiyar Tirumuri, more than 140 verses, and it's a love song. It's rather different as compared to the Tirupavai, which is pastoral song. And there's so much simplicity about it, and the metaphors that are associated with the Tirupavai is something that, you know, Indians have grown up with. The butter and the curd and the cowherds, yes, and the jewelry and the daily rituals of religion, etc. So there was a lot of relevance for that, you know, and you were right. So that was my intention in taking it to another audience. So yes, I have a question for you, Sonia. I know that you understand, you've lived in India before, not just now, and then, you know, you're so close to Indian culture, and you understand it from a very close angle. You speak Hindi very fluently, you've studied Sanskrit, you know some Tamil as well, you've studied music, Indian music, dance, etc. So for you, from that perspective, how does such a translation of this kind of an ancient classical work help the French reader get closer to it or understand India better? Do you think it serves purpose?
Yes, for sure. Of course, for me, you know, while I was reading it, I was like, you know, taken back to the first years when I was in India in the 90s. You know, I was lucky, and I'm so grateful that I was lucky enough to be in India, you know, in the rural parts of India before internet, cable TV, and mass tourism came actually to those areas, and started changing a little bit, you know, the atmosphere and so I've known that side of India, the rural and pastoral life which is described in those poems. So for me, I thought those poems were full of you know, images and tastes and ambience of that India which exists, which is still there today, yes, even though it has changed, but it's still there today. And also, all these poems are full of allegories and, you know, concepts which are so much part of Indian psyche. you know, all the gods and goddesses and the stories of Ravana and you know, the as you said, the so all these for me it's so familiar, of course, because I mean now I've been closely linked with India for 25 years, and I've lived in Varanasi, which is like the one of the cultural hearts of India for more than 2.5 years. I've studied Bharatanatyam and Drupad, so I know all these stories and the meaning of those allegories and the concepts. So I thought for me this text and these poems took me to another level. I could understand them beyond, because I could understand the idea and the concept that which was behind. But I think that even for someone who does not know Hinduism and hasn't read the Upanishad and hasn't read the Bhagavad Gita and is not familiar with the fact that God is usually described, I mean, is usually colored in blue. Yes. It's mentioned in one of the poems, the blue color of the God. Yeah. And so, of course, even if they are not familiar with all these, because, as you said, the poems are so simple and so accessible, I think it's a good way actually to enter the traditional India and to get a taste of the simplicity of life in rural India, and the simplicity and the purity of the feelings. And so I think it's a great way to access Indian culture. And by the way, even today, more than 60% of the population in India lives in villages. So it's still a rural population. Absolutely. So even though, as we said, internet and mobile phone did change the psyche and the exposure to the world, but still they are very attached to this rural and pastoral life. So I think it's a great introduction.
Thank you. Yes, yes. In fact, you were so right in saying that it's very much an existing culture, because I have grown up with my grandmother churning the butter and the milk and all those things, and it's still taking place in many households. And you can see that this is a way of life that has not entirely gone off, despite all the technology and all the things that have revolutionized our century. Most of this is existing, and the Tirupavai, because of its simplicity and the depth of the philosophy, because it's a sort of an external simplicity as far as the lyrics go. There's a lot of profound meaning within, which experts have commented upon and delved into it. And this simplicity also lends itself so well to music, And it's Goda, as Andal was also called, one of the meanings of her name is also means sweet song. And everywhere, the Tiruppavai, the song element keeps coming. And therefore, it's all of this combined together make, as a musician, I always sing the Tiruppavai in my concerts. And it's so close to me from all these different angles that I really felt the need again and again to take it to other audiences, to other readers.
Yes, and you're right to, you're right to stress upon the fact that it's sung. We forget, because we're used in the West, we're used to poems which are read, and but actually those poems are sung till today, and this is probably why it's been, like so vivid and still alive today. Yes. Because as we mentioned, it's only very, 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 very recently that internet, TV and mobile phone came to rural areas. But before, to animate the long, evenings in the summer or in the winter, people were singing, and they were actually telling all the mythological texts, the Mahabharata and all these poems were sung to memorize them, but also to tell a story, to keep the children active, and so it's
yes, absolutely, because the Andal story itself is extremely fascinating. She was a very young girl and she was completely lost in God love for Vishnu. And her second work, the Nachya Tirumuri, is a complete statement of that total passion and devotion through that love poetry. The Tirupavai is, itself, in its simplicity of its 30 poems, and you're so right, it takes you back to many references of Hindu culture, the gods, the anecdotes and everything. Therefore, the story of Andal itself becomes a recitation and a way of learning for young kids through the Tirupavai. And the fact that it's sung, in Carnatic music, it's a sacred form of music. Therefore, the Tirupavai and the Tiruvambavai, which is the Shaivite saints' works, so all this find a place in the repertoire of Carnatic music. So there's a fantastic synergy between music, religion, spirituality, dance, and all this, It's a symbiotic relationship.
Yes, but let's talk a little bit about the actual huge and amazing work of translation which you've done, and it's a very big task. What were the challenges in translating the Tirupavai into French? And what I want to know is, because of course translating a poem is different from translating literature. So were you more attached to translating the precision and the accuracy of each word, or do you care more about keeping the aestheticism and the global rhythm of the poem? Because as you said, it's sung, so it comes with the rhythm. And so how do you work when you translate such a text?
Well, your question said, what were the challenges? And well, I must underscore that it is challenging. Any work of translation is challenging, and more so when it's poetry, and more so when it's a work like the Tirupavai, because it's removed from your age and time. And it's something so special to our culture and philosophy. So, I have translated other poetry before, like the author Perumal Murugan, who's a contemporary writer, and some of his poems into French, and then some other works from Marathi into French, and Tamil also, short stories. But this one is of an entirely different nature. It's so laden with all these cultural connotations that I couldn't remain attached to the word if I had to convey the meaning. And at some times, at moments, I was attached to special words. So it is a combination of the two. I wanted to, every translator seeks his identity in the translation, in the sense you have to interpret the text and then you have to bring it out. So it's something that touches your core. You have to lift that poetry, and then you produce it in translation. So there is also a lot of you in it. And at the same time, you have to remain a little loyal to the original text. So there's always this tug of war. And I wanted to convey the quintessence, the very essence of the Tirupavai without damaging that. And yes, the meaning, the global meaning of this beautiful poetry. So sometimes I would invert the order of the verses as and when it came to me, because it goes in a certain order in Tamil and it makes sense, but then the syntax of French is different. Therefore, I did take those liberties of a translator. But, some words like Kuttu Vilakku. Kuttu Vilakku is the lamp on the pedestal in Tamil Nadu. And it is so, it has a special form and a grace to it, and the way it's made. So if anyone talks of the Kuttu Vilakku, you know what they're referring to, because the lamp from Kerala is different, lamp from other region is different. So in one of the poems, the lovely glow of this Vilakku, this lamp, inside Napinai's bedchamber. She is Krishna's consort. So these young girls, including Andal, are going there in order to perform. They want to perform the Pavai Nombu ceremony, which even today we have the Nombu ceremony. So they are entreating Krishna to bless them and to give them all that is required to perform this. So they go from waking up every girl and finally reaching Krishna's abode. That's the story of the Tiruppavai in 30 verses. So they reach Napinai's bedchamber, and it's all full of this beautiful glow of the Kuttavilakku. So I did not want to translate it into, saying a lamp in French, just a lamp. So I kept the source word, Kuttavilakku. And in another poem, she talks about the Madhavi Creeper. Now, this is an Indian plant, Madhavi Creeper. I did not want to change it into just a literal translation. So I retained the word Madhavi. So in some places, I have been attached to those words, and in some places, I have not been. So I've just tried to portray the essence of this poetry. And it's so rhythmic, you were right, And there are anaphorous poems. They all start Ari Mare Kanna. There's Ari, which comes in every line at the beginning. It's very difficult to translate in such a way into another language. Therefore, that was not my concern either, because maintaining these anaphors and the richness of the alliterations that keep coming in, all that did become a challenge, but I would somehow try to portray it in a different way in French language to make sense. So there would be rhyme, but it would come out in a different fashion.
Yes, it's really a challenge because, of course, there is the work on the language, on the linguistic, but also, as you said, you cannot forget the whole essence. Basically, these poems also are there to ignite a feeling of devotion, of love, and of course, like all these words that you mentioned, like the lamp, like these plants, I think for an Indian are part of, are able to raise this love and because it's part of life in India. The lamp is a sacred lamp, so it helps in getting to that level of devotion and love. And so the whole challenge is how to ignite the same feeling to another audience which doesn't have the same reference. So
you're very right, because that is the very core of the Tiruppavai. So my preoccupation was also to retain that fervor and that flavor, the original flavor, and then put it into a foreign language. So altogether, that task is quite daunting. It is very daunting, and sometimes I would wonder whether I've done it the right way. Am I portraying the right emotions? So those who've read it have told me that, well, many of them being India lovers and Indian culture lovers, and they said that yes, it's different kind of poetry, and they really enjoyed it. So,
yes, I think you've done an amazing work, and you've done, you really, for me, India is so special, and it's been for many years because I see how this land has been for centuries and centuries, a land which has given birth to so many saints and mystics, and where esotericism has been, very vivid throughout the centuries, alongside religion, like a more structural religion with its codes, and whereas in the West, religion took, more place, and mysticism and esotericism was more hidden and not lost, because we have big mystics, but less accessible to, the common man. Whereas in India, the saints and the mystic and, the esotericism was always very present.
Yes.
And so for me, I feel it's a great gift that you've given not only French audience, but also humanity, because this is part of, these are part of the treasures of humankind. So it's great to be able to, offer them to another audience.
Thank you. Yes, this mystical poetry, because the Alvars are the greatest of the mystics. And, so to be able to contribute to the great body of work that they have given us, this is just a drop in the ocean, but I'm glad that it is there. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Yes. Maybe we could read some of the text to give, our audience flavor and a taste of it.
Yes, yes.
So I will not dare read it in Tamil. I will leave that to you.
Sure, I should read it in Tamil. Which poem would you like to start with? Perhaps.
So maybe we can start with the first one.
The very first one. The very first one. Yes, it sets the tone because it says in this month of Margali, we are preparing. It's the young girls who are now preparing for the Nomba ceremony, and wish to pay their obeisance to Narayana or Vishnu, who is vividly described here as the child of Yashoda. And, you spoke about the blue body, like the clouds. Well, that's this poem. So I shall read the very first poem of the Tiruppavai, that is Margali Tingal. So, Margali Tingal Madinirainda Nannalal, Neerada Poduvir Podumino Neruyir. Shirmalgum Aipadi Shelvat Chirumirgal, Kurvel Kodundalan Nandagopan Kumaran. Yeranda Kanni Yashode Ilam Shingam, Karmeni Shenkan Kadarmadiyam Pol Muhattan, Narayane Namake Paretaruvan, Paror Puhar Padindelor and Pavan. Would you like to read the French?
Yes, of course. I'll read it in French. Margali Tingalé. En ce mois de Margali, riche en nuits de clair de lune, celles qui souhaitent participer au bain, dépêchez-vous. Ô chère demoiselle, aux belles parures, fille de Gokulam, terre de prospérité, ignorez-vous que le divin Narayana et lui seul pourra nous donner le pareil? Ce fils de Nandagopa, à la tranchante épée versée dans l'espièglerie, ce jeune lionceau de Yashoda, aux beaux yeux de lotus, au corps bleu et rafraîchissant tels les nuages, à la figure lumineuse comme la pleine lune, observons le nombu et récoltons ainsi l'estime et l'éloge de tous. Notre prière unique en sera fructueuse.
Thank you, Sonia. That was beautiful.
And maybe before we go to the second text, maybe you could explain why every poem finishes with that line. In French, it says, Notre prière unique en sera fructueuse. Maybe you could say a few words on this.
Thank you for drawing attention to that. In fact, when you asked me about the challenges of translating, this was one of the biggest challenges, because every Tiruppavai, all the 30 Tiruppavais end with this refrain in the end, Elor and Pavai, and it's very difficult to translate it. Each time it's preceded by a different set of words that lend it a different meaning. So the last words, Elor and Pavai, are constantly there, but the meaning changes. And when you read experts, they attribute different meanings to these words. They're not as simple as they sound. Therefore, one had to come with, for a translation such as this, which is not of academic nature, but it is something that I wanted to reach everybody, to the lay listener, the lay reader. So I decided to keep this single sentence, our prayer shall be considered, our vow shall be heard, our, chants shall be listened to by the Lord. So I decided to stick to this in order to give it that repetitive flavor that comes with every poem. Okay. Because it was near to impossible to translate that in each and every poem where it's not the same. Therefore, Notre prière unique en sera fructueuse in French, our special prayer will be fruitful. That's the hope of all these young girls. So it is not wrong, but it's difficult to translate exactly. So that's why I chose this translation for every poem and decided to keep with it.
Yes, but it gives like a continuity, and it's a link throughout the poem, so it's nice.
Yes.
It's a little bit like Amen No, maybe
you're right. You're right, because it's like a
at the end of the
culmination.
prayer, like amen to.
Yes, culmination to whatever we are doing, and hope that that will be done.
Exactly.
So that's
And
the hope.
made be. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So that is the hope with which the young girls approach Mahavishnu for this ceremony. Okay. Shall we move to the third poem? Or would you like to?
Sure.
Can we read that? Ongi Ulahalanda, which is one of my favorite poems because it is so full of the richness of nature, to which I'm so deeply connected. I'm a fervent nature lover of all that nature professes. And this poem talks about, the beautiful fields and the paddy and the redness of the stalks, the young, fresh, stalks of wheat and paddy, and beautiful metaphors like the bees, which are drunk with the nectar and they cannot even move, and the cows, which are so full of milk, and there's so much of abundant prosperity.
Yes.
I think this is a prayer for all humanity, for all times, because all we seek is this beauty. There's ecological concern, and there is this abundance.
Yes.
So for me, this is a beautiful poem, and it talks about Vishnu who measured the three worlds. So I have seen this Vishnu who lifted his leg and measured the three worlds. It's amazing in temples when you see it, So it's one of my favorite poems, and I shall read it in Tamil. Ongi ulahalanda uttaman per paadi, nangal nampavaikku shaatri neeradinal, தீங்கின்றி நாடெல்லாம் திங்கள் மும்மாரி பெய்து ஓங்கு பெருஞ்சன்னல் ஊடுகயலுகள பூங்குவளை போதில் பொறிவண்டு கண்படுப்ப தேங்காதை புக்கிரந்து சீர்த்த முலை பற்றி வாங்க குடம் நிறைக்கும் வள்ளல் பெரும் பசுக்கள் நீங்காத செல்வம் நிறைந்தேலோர் எம்பாவாய்.
Magnifique. Alors en français, Ongi Ulagalanda. En chantant les noms de Vishnu, celui qui s'est déployé pour mesurer l'univers, nous prendrons le bain du Nombu. Ainsi, notre contrée sera bénie de 3 pluies chaque mois et préservée de tout mal. Les poissons s'esquiveront entre les longues tiges élancées de blé rouge. Des abeilles repues paraîtront sur les pétales des lotus. Des vaches offriront du lait au moindre toucher, remplissant prestement les grands brocs. Lait si riche, abondant et dense que seuls les vigoureux pourront traire. Une telle prospérité impérissable se répandra sur tout le pays. Notre prière unique en sera fructueuse. C'est vrai, it's really opulence. It's and you, yes, it's all the richness of nature and yes, and you're rich in the yes.
Yeah. And it's also a message because in today's world, when we are busy destroying nature, this abundance of nature and the importance, because it's all part of our ecology and fundamental to our very existence. So if we do not protect this and pay attention to this beauty, we are going to ultimately perish. So I think this is timeless poetry that deals with so many levels and appeals to humankind across cultures, across time.
Yes, that's true.
I know, Sonia, you have a favorite poem.
Yes, there is one which I like very much because it really, when I read it, I was reading it, I was transported back to my times in Varanasi in the south of India. I visited, countless temples, and at the time of the darshan, you see like people, the huge crowds, like gathering and trying to step on top of the other just to get a glimpse of the divinity. But they don't just want to see the divinity, they want the divinity to see them, because with the concept of darshan, you are purified by the look that the divinity puts on you. And so it really drew me back to these times because it speaks of darshan. So if you want, I'll be happy to read it.
Yes, we've got a little time there, so maybe you can, I will not read the Tamil version, maybe you can just read the English, the French version. And,
okay. Yes, okay. So I'll try to say the title. It's Angannemaya Latu.
Anganmal Nyalatin.
Okay, that's better. Nous sommes devant toi, tout comme les rois de cette vaste et belle terre, présents au pied de ton lit, ayant renoncé à leur orgueil. Tes yeux, pareils au lotus mi-clos, bijoux en forme de pendeloque, ne s'ouvriront-ils pas pour nous combler? Accorde-nous un regard de tes yeux resplendissants, comme la lune et le soleil levant, pour que toute malédiction sur nous disparaisse à jamais. Notre prière unique en sera fructueuse. And it's really like they say, like, please, 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 just look at us, give us a glimpse, and then we will be purified and forever, and malediction will go away. So it's really this...
It's this supplication to God, and then the description, you know, his lotus-like eyes and the jewelry and the resplendent eyes that they want, the devotee wants, should cast a glance. So he was so right, you know. And the blue-hued God that keeps coming out. In fact, it's interesting because the cover of the book is also has got the blue of
That's true.
Krishna. That was a choice of the editor, and when I asked that's what he told me. He said, you know, Vishnu is blue, so that's why we chose this color.
Yes, that's true. And with the beautiful drawing of Andal.
Yes, that's Andal, typically with her hairdo, which is called the Andal Konde in Tamil, you know, the Andal hairdo. And even today in weddings, young girls or brides are dressed up as Andals.
Oh, okay.
It's not uncommon to find a bride dressed like Andal.
Well, she looks like a bride for sure with all this.
Yes, she is the eternal bride, because if you read her next, the other work, Nachya Tirumuri, she wants to unify herself with God, and in one of her dreams, she imagines the wedding ceremony, and finally she blends and merges with Vishnu. And thus she became Saint Andal. So she is the eternal
bride.
Yes, absolutely.
So do we have time for another, or?
I think we have to close the session now.
Okay. Anyway, people can read all of the poems, and you know, like throughout the month of this month, actually, Margali. So we will leave all of you with these sounds and rhythms, and with the burning feeling of devotion. So once again, I would like to thank you, dear Vasumathi, for you know, like doing this work, which is such a challenging, as you said, challenging work of translating not only the words, but the aestheticism, the beauty, and all what it carries about India, rural India, its values, and its relevance today. So thank you so much for giving us this gift and this pleasure.
Thank you very much, Sonia, to you. A big thank you to you for appreciating, for engaging in this discussion today, for your time and your interest in the Tirupavai. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And yes, thank you to the Jaipur Literature Festival for bringing also, you know, these kind of books and literature which are universal, and showing that there is a universal beauty which is accessible to all.
Yes, so big thanks to Jaipur Literature Festival and this unique program, Words Are Bridges, which brings together books, languages across countries, across time, across people, across cultures. So thank you so much. And thanks to you again, Sonia.
Thank you, dear Vasumathi.
Thank you, Dr. Vasumathi and Her Excellency Sonia Barbry, for that brilliant session. Thank you all for watching and being a great audience. If you've enjoyed the session, please do share it on your social media pages. We do hope you will tune in for our next session on 21st January at 7 p.m. The session is Sakshi Bhav, Bhavna Sumaya in conversation with Tiska Chopra, with a reading by Pratik Gandhi. Hope to see you soon. Have a lovely evening.